Okay, I think that should just about cover it. Other people come in late, that's fine. Um, we do record these, so they're always free to rewatch it. But thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is John Gestel. I'm our client relations coordinator, investor relations manager, whatever you want to call it, here at Royalty Exchange. Joining me as always is Rob Bernhardt, our corporate counsel here, and Dayton O'Connor. He's our lead analyst. Um, for those of you who have been here before, you probably know how this goes. For those of you who are new, we'll be running through a few different slides, talking about a few different topics. Then we'll get to the submitted questions, which a ton of people submitted to sign up. And then we'll address any live questions that you guys might have. And that's going to be the rough agenda for this call. Specifically on this call, we're going to be looking at risks and valuation methodologies for royalty investing. For those of you who are new, these are pulled directly from our Ultimate Guide to Buying Royalties, which we just recently remastered and re-released. It is, in my opinion, the best resource that exists for royalty investing, and it's free. So we'll be doing kind of a cursory look at some of those subjects, but definitely take a look at the guide. It gets way deeper on a lot of it. We'll also be looking at the updates from the MLC and those much anticipated CRB catch-up payments from streaming mechanical royalties that we've been shouting from the mountaintops for about 2 years now. And then we'll be going into our special asset sneak peek for something that's going live today. That's really exciting. So without further ado, let's get started here. First, we'll be talking about two different royalty valuation methodologies that we typically look at. First is using purchase multiples. Second is using a discounted cash flow analysis, which is a pretty standard analysis strategy. For purchase multiples, pretty simple. It's what is the multiple of the last 12 months earnings to pay for an asset. To determine this, we look at things like the dollar age, trend rates, source earnings, general aspects of a catalog that might impact the move forward revenue. Pretty straightforward. For discounted cash flow analysis, it's a bit more technical, creating an actual cash flow, determining your risk, having a weighted cost of capital, things like that. So for purchase multiples analysis, a couple of questions you're going to want to ask yourself. How consistent is the cash flow? What are the sources and how do those typically behave? Obviously, earnings from radio are not going to be as consistent on a move forward basis as, like, say, for example, streaming. Things played on a TV show might not perform the same as something that's on a commercial, for example. You also want to look for one-off payments, outlier payments. This could be things like catch-ups, big sink payments, things that you can't rely on for the future. So when determining a fair offer value, normally want to level those out so you kind of get a more realistic view of the consistent cash flow compared to the upside. And then what's your earning horizon look like? Obviously, these don't always earn forever. As you've probably seen on Royalty Exchange, we have 10-year deals and less. We have assets that are fixed return, so based on a recoupment amount rather than a time period. And then even the life of rights can have varying lengths of time depending on when the IP was created. Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's prior to 1978 is when the copyright length changed.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so prior to 1978, it's 95 years from the published date, versus after that date, it's the life of the last surviving artist plus 70 years. So understanding those time periods also can, impact your valuation. Like I mentioned a few seconds ago, the three primary things we look at are dollar age, trend rate, and source. Those seem to have the biggest impact on, um, the move forward revenue. So obviously there are other things you want to consider, but those are kind of the big three for us. Now for discounted cash flow analysis, forecasting future cash flows using a discount rate. Dayton, you want to walk us through quickly what investors might want to look at for things like this and what we look at when we are putting together our discounted cash flows?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that, John. So when you're considering the value of an asset, and you want to potentially forecast what that cash flow is going to look like in the future, you're going to be looking at a lot of those same factors that John had outlined in the purchase multiple analysis. So on our site, when you're looking at these assets, you're going to have a lot of data not only for what you're bidding on, but also what the market is telling you with other assets, bid behavior for similar things, similar dollar ages. That's going to play into how you're looking at those purchase multiples. And those factors that John called out in terms of consistency of cash flow, the source of these cash flows, if there's any special considerations to be made in terms of outlier payments or who is paying this money or the frequency with which it's being generated, that's all going to play into assumption, or rather, that all can play into assumptions of how you forecast your cash flows. Obviously, we can't give you any guidance in terms of how to forecast that money. And I think if you ask, a finance professional or an analyst in the music industry about the best way to consider the historic value of an asset and how that's going to inform the future value of an asset, you're going to get a bunch of different answers. So best to do your own research on how those play into those future cash flows that are being generated. But those are factors that you can consider. The dollar age, where the asset is being paid from, how that money is being generated, the historic earnings, all that is going to inform what those future earnings look like. If there's a long tail to the distributions, if you expect that those monies are going to peter out over time, if there are certain sources that are going to grow up over time. And then we talk about your cost of capital with the discount rate. This is the piece for investors where you're going to want to consider for your own investment strategy how this is fitting into your portfolio, what your returns are going to look like depending on your bid behavior. If we expect with an asset that there is going to be a lot more volatility, say if it is a lower dollar age asset, those earnings tend to be less predictable in the intermediate to long-term period relative to older assets. That's higher risk. You'll naturally require a higher rate of return for your investment versus the higher dollar age assets, the more consistently earning assets. Say if you're looking at something on our site and the last 12 months earnings and the last 3 years earnings averages are basically equivalent, that suggests consistency in the historic earnings, which may translate to consistency in the future earnings as well. It is natural to expect that you would require a lower return on that particular asset. So your cost of capital is going to be dropping.
Right.
That I think covers it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's great nutshell. And again, both of these are we dive into them in much more detail in the ultimate guide. I just wanted to kind of give you guys a taste of kind of what we get into there. So again, take a look at that. You'll find much deeper explanations into all this stuff, more links, more resources, all that's everything you need. So with the methodologies covered, let's look at some risks. There's a couple different things that investors will want to consider when looking at royalty assets. We at Royalty Exchange, as a marketplace and steward of a lot of these royalties, we actually cover a lot of this stuff for you. But there's still things that you want to be knowledgeable about and understand. Things like valuation risk, what's a fair price to pay? It's where those valuation methodologies are really going to come into play. Counterparty risk. Will someone default on their contracts? Technology risk, regulatory risk, inflation risk, legal risk, administrative risk, liquidity risk. Obviously, there's a lot of things to consider. Rob, will you take us through a lot of the legality behind these risks, things like counterparty, legal, admin, regulatory, things that investors would want to consider that we might not necessarily be able to cover?
Certainly, I think probably a good overview is to start with what kind of diligence does Royalty Exchange do before an asset is posted on our marketplace to kind of address some of the stuff that it's easy to find ahead of time. So what we do when a royalty owner first contacts us about listing their asset on the marketplace is we determine who they are. We confirm that they are who they say they are, that they own what they say they own, and that they have the ability to assign it. So first we do a lien judgment search on the seller themselves. That will typically find things like judgments, tax liens that could ultimately encumber the royalty stream. If those things pop up, then those need to be taken care of either before or at closing. If a seller can't pay those off, then we're not able to move forward with them. We also contact their royalty distributor directly, ask about the royalty account. Are there any encumbrances from that end? Some things that pop up that we see are share disputes on, what share they are entitled to on certain songs. So those kind of things can get uncovered in the pre-listing diligence process. Things that could pop up in perhaps their publishing contract, if it's a publishing deal or recording contract or producer contract. We look at those and check with the distributor to make sure that all of the terms of those contracts are honored as a part of the deal. So we kind of try to make sure that the asset is in a good place to be able to sell before it even gets looked at by an investor and ends up on the marketplace. So, and as a part of the sale process, Royalty Exchange becomes the administrator of payments, so that the investors are then protected from any sort of counterparty risk on the seller being required to make any payments over to the buyer. What we do is we do not settle funds until the distributor of the royalties has confirmed for us that the assignment has been put in place. We also hold 10% of the purchase price until we receive the first correct payment from that distributor. What that protects against is say that the assignment takes place really close to when the next distribution is going to be. A lot of times the distributor doesn't have a chance to update their records in time, and that payment will go to the seller. So what we do is, since we withhold 10% of the purchase price, we debit that, make sure that the investor gets paid that first payment until we can ensure that the assignment has put in place. So we kind of try to address the counterparty stuff, the contractual stuff, any sort of lien issues all ahead of time, and then Royalty Exchange then being the administrator after the fact, that kind of handles any issues that would pop up after during the assignment, and then after the assignment has taken place, we'll be in a position to help sort out any issues that happen that way. Does that kind of cover what
Yeah,
you were
that's
looking for,
perfect. I
John?
mean,
Okay.
in a nutshell, just from buying through Royalty Exchange, you immediately eliminate about half of these listed risks just because we cover that for you. And then any kind of legal fees that you might pay if you were doing this on your own, we take care of it. So that's liquidity risk, admin risk, legal risk, counterparty risk, technology risk, regulatory risk, and inflation risk are kind of outside of our control. And then valuation risk is really up to you, but everything else is, taken care of. All of these, again, in the Ultimate Guide, we get into more detail about what specifically you should be looking at, what kind of different things can happen, other ways that Royalty Exchange might help, and strategies you can take to help, mitigate these risks to you as a royalty investor. So take a look at that. Should be really, really helpful.
And one thing, so our purchase agreement is standard across all the deals, depending on the royalty type, and that is embedded within our terms of use. Anyone can go and look at the agreement. The agreement does provide other protections for things that are unforeseen at the time of the sale. Things like a representations that the seller makes as to, hey, I do own this, and no issues pop up during the sale. If that comes down the road, then the investor does have a cause of action if the stream is then affected by something that the seller could or should have known about. You're at least contractually protected by the purchase agreement, and that's another thing that is really valuable for Royalty Exchanges. That standard agreement, you don't have to have a lawyer negotiate with the seller on each deal. You kind of know exactly what to expect every time. So we kind of try to standardize everything through the contracts that way as well.
And to that point, JB, it's your question, is the buyer at risk if Royalty Exchange fails? No, you're not. Because our agreements are a direct purchase between you and the seller. So we're not a party to it. Your entitlement exists outside of our existence. Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, and the the interplay there is as a purchaser on Royalty Exchange, we also have a standard accounting agreement that's also linked within our terms of use that kind of goes through Royalty Exchange's obligations to you, the investor, to collect payments, pass them on to you. If Royalty Exchange is no longer able to do that, we're required to either find a replacement administrator, set up some sort of advanced or direct collection, and if Royalty Exchange really just ceases to exist and overnight, we disappear. There is a limited power of attorney for investors to act on Royalty Exchange's behalf to make sure that those royalties are then flowing as agreed in that purchase agreement.
Perfect. Okay, so next one that many people are waiting for. What's the latest in the MLC? So, beginning of this year, the MLC announced that they've started
John,
receiving.
I'm sorry. We have another legal question that just came in that I think would
yeah, go
probably
ahead.
be worthwhile addressing while we're kind of on it.
Yeah, please
So
do.
it's what legal recourse is available if there's a fraud, misrepresentation, or non-performance by a counterparty. The purchase agreement lays out all the different representations that sellers make. If there's a fraud, then it would be essentially rescinding the agreement. Then the seller would be required to return the funds, and the sale would be rescinded and canceled.
Okay, so now over to the MLC. So, beginning of this year, the Mechanical Licensing Collective announced that they've started receiving payments for streaming mechanical royalty catch-up payments from DSPs, digital service providers, companies like Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, etc. This is kind of what those payments have started to look like. As you can see in the most recent quarter for both of these two different publishing assets, pretty huge payments have come through. So this is really exciting and something we've been looking for a couple of years since, the whole CRB, it's the Copyright Royalty Board, for those of you who aren't familiar, made the determination that they are retroactively increasing these streaming mechanical royalty rates. So basically what happened is every 5 years, the Copyright Royalty Board reviews the royalty payout rates for streaming mechanical royalties so that they can, keep up with modern times. What happened was they determined that from the periods of 2018 to 2020, basically, they had to increase those rates incrementally on a percentage basis. So what you're seeing here is a result of those catch-up payments being paid out for the stream mechanical royalties. Now, this is only for U.S. domestic streaming mechanical royalties. It doesn't apply to international. But we've done a bunch of different analyses on kind of what that could look like. And we weren't too far off. If you're an All Access member, you would have gotten the most recent All Access report where we actually do a fleshed out retroactive allocation by the different reporting periods. So you can kind of see that a bit more normalized. But the point is that the payments have started and it's exciting. Now, you might be asking, okay, well, they made this big catch up. Is it done? No, it's not done. They've done only about half of the expected. And so payments are expected to continue through 2025. This is from the MLC's website. They do provide regular updates to their users, payees, etc., about what's going on. So basically, every month they address a new portion of the back pay royalties to then pay out. So there is still quite a bit coming, and this is just for the majors. It doesn't even include all the derivative DSPs that are out there, which I think there was something like 23, maybe, who all owed payments. So there's still a lot more to come. You also may notice that not all publishing assets have paid out these catch-ups. So there's probably still more to come for people who haven't gotten through all of the accounting and the administrative part of it. So yeah, there's still quite a bit more to come, which is super exciting. So stay tuned for that. We'll keep reporting on it as we kind of see it, and let you guys know what to expect, what that looks like. But yeah, really, really exciting to see that. And hopefully a lot of you guys have gotten some sweet returns from those payments coming through. Now, we do have one kind of surprise for you all. We're doing an early announcement on an asset that's going live later today. It's a really, really high quality asset. It is the royalties to Hungry Like the Wolf by Duran Duran. So this full listing is going live today. It's just the US domestic royalties. But I mean, it's a 40-year-old catalog. It's a song that pretty much everyone and their mother knows. The earnings have been kicking ass, for lack of a better word. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that today. That's going to be going live. We're super excited about it. Hope you guys are too. So yeah, just a sneak peek at the financials here. Life of Rights and everything. It's a great one. And that should about cover it. So we'll get to our Q&A section here. Like I mentioned before, first we're going to go through the submitted questions. There's quite a few of them. And then we'll address any other live questions that come through. I see there's a few more here. So starting from the top, how many do we got here? We got about 40. It's kind of usual. All right, so first one. What happens to my investment once the royalty period has expired? Who sells the royalties on the listings and why? So once the royalty period ends, depending on the term that you purchase, if it's for the life of rights, for example, then the intellectual property is no longer eligible for royalty collection once the life of rights has expired. So the property goes to the public domain. For the limited term deals, the 10 years, the 30 years, those rights just automatically revert back to the original seller of the royalties. So there's no like return of capital or anything like that. It's just royalty stream ends. You are paying for the right to collect the royalties for the period. So that's something you want to factor into your own purchase analysis and any pricing that you do. Who sells the royalties and the listings and why? Could be the performing artist, could be just a regular songwriter, could be a producer, could be anyone who's entitled to a royalty stream. Now, why they sell? Every reason under the sun. We've seen plenty of artists who are looking to invest in their own futures. So whether that's paying for another artist to be on their new album, making an at-home studio. We've seen some people who are trying to buy a house, so they needed the money for a down payment on their house. So any reason, like anyone would sell any high-quality asset they own, sometimes stuff comes up. I mean, some people have had to pay medical bills, so they had to sell. So tons of reasons.
Estate planning, and
All of it.
we also work with as sellers a lot of heirs and successors to the original rights owners as well.
Yep. Yeah, so tons of reasons and tons of different people who sell. Next, how do taxes come into play with royalties? Once you purchase with us, you would have to sign a W-9, and we'd send you a 1099 miscellaneous at tax season. Talk to your tax advisor about how you want to claim this stuff. It is illegal for us to provide you with any sort of tax advice, so that's our default. But you will get a 1099. Your listings show cash flow for the individual items, but not the percentage of the total royalty being offered. Yes, that is correct. You're not buying a controlling interest in this stuff, so the size of your stake doesn't really matter. The earnings as presented on the listing are specific to what is for sale. Now, as far as like the overall percentage of everything, we don't even really have access to that information because you're talking about looking at the split sheets for all of the different songwriters, co-writers, performing artists, publishers, everything, which a lot of that is protected under confidentiality. We don't even have access to it. So normally what you're looking at is just an individual's stake. And then on the purchase agreement, we do include the percentage of that individual stake. But yeah, that's the best we can offer. Robert, Dane, I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
Nope.
Do you pay upcoming artists royalties? Potentially. What we can do is largely dependent on the royalty payor and what they will allow, and then also the earnings themselves. So if an upcoming artist fits with the criteria we need to fill to move forward listing, yeah, we'll do it. It might be considered a higher risk assets. They might not get the prices that they want because upcoming typically implies younger. But yeah, if the earnings fit, we could do it.
Yeah, I guess the key there is it has to have some sort of earnings history in order to be
Right.
listed
Yeah.
on Royalty Exchange. So if an artist has literally not earned anything, then they would be not eligible to list an asset.
Right.
Right. That's a different line of business. I mean, how are we defining up and coming here? Is it someone who, just got signed to a label and or is unsigned and hasn't put out music yet? Then most likely not.
Right.
Because our bread and butter business is these catalog sales. But
Right.
if it's someone who's, had a couple singles under their belt, it's a different story.
All comes down to the earnings. How to start investing and what is the best option to encourage me? Well, to start, just get your account verified and then off you go. I would say, again, read The Ultimate Guide to Buying Royalties because that will be a very valuable resource for you for understanding royalties, learning how the market works, everything that you need. So I'd say take a look at that. And then, yeah, reach out to us if you have questions. If something's unclear, if, you want to walk through an asset, we do help with that. So reach out to us. We can help too. What are the basics of music royalties investments? We've kind of covered that a little bit. Again, I'd point you to the Ultimate Guide. That's going to be your best resource. What is the best source of information for a new investor who wants to scale investments progressively over the next 2 years? Look at the Ultimate Guide. What's the average pay to make an offer? Right now, the median asset sale price, I think, is around like 50 to 70K. But you can find stuff in the 5 to 10K range. That's kind of the low one you should expect. Um, yeah, roughly around there. Typically, this stuff sells for tens of thousands of dollars, so that's kind of what you should expect. What's the most aggressive strategy approach to investing in royalties without large purchasing power? I'm not super sure how to answer that. Make a lot of offers, I guess. Um, yeah, or adjust your returns.
Yeah, is this really a question about risk tolerance if we're talking
Yeah,
aggressive strategies? Uh, yeah, I mean, stuff that's younger, there's a lot less predictability. So, there's potential for upside, there's potential for downside. If there's a catalog that, you have some kind of inkling that there is high likelihood for sync payments, uh, then you could invest in that and potentially bank on some upside if something gets placed in a TV show and we see that catalog then rip once the placement takes off.
yeah,
But I mean, I it's sort of tough because you don't really have any, presumably, any visibility into how these tracks are being used in this way.
yeah.
Um, so that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, so the question is kind of like oxymoronic in a way, because you're talking about an aggressive strategy, which requires purchasing a lot, but without large purchasing power, which kind of prevents you from being aggressive because you have to be more selective.
I
So,
mean, I'll caveat it like this. Because we think about like what the returns that we see for assets in the secondary market, John, where like we have seen instances of investors making pretty sizable returns um with a buy and sell strategy where
yeah,
they're only holding onto their assets for a short period of time. It gets relisted automatically on the site. Future investors come in, sometimes weeks after the fact, a very short time period, even before other like royalties are paid through, um, post purchase, and they bid on that asset. They see it as having higher value, and it gets sold. So
that's true.
that's a potential strategy. But again, that's you making an investment and then saying, I'm willing to hold on to this asset for an indefinite period of time until someone else comes along and makes bids and I can sell that to the upside. So there's a lot of factors in there that you can't control, a lot of, potential
Right.
known unknowns.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great point. Yeah. Some people have sold it. I think the shortest time period I've seen is like 2 weeks, held for
It's
two
amazing.
weeks, held for two
Yeah.
weeks and sold for profit. So it can happen. Yeah, for sure. I'm only interested in lifelong deals. Are those available or is it forfeited after 30 plus years? Just check the term length on the asset. We get life of rights is definitely the most common. Um, There's a handful of 30 years that come up. Those are largely assets that are being paid by ASCAP because they have pretty specific rules on assignment terms that they'll allow. Um, but there's plenty of life of rights, so you should have no trouble finding that. Next, do you or plan to accept crypto payments? No, unfortunately not. There was a period of time where we were doing NFT style structures. We don't really do those anymore. And those were paid through the Ethereum blockchain. But for regular asset purchases, unfortunately, we cannot accept crypto. So we can't and no plans to. Maybe it'll change in the future. I doubt it. We will see. Next one here. Can we only purchase fragments of music rights? So the rights included on any listing will kind of be dependent on the company that's paying the royalties because they'll only collect a certain type. Like, for example, ASCAP BMI, they collect the public performance royalties specifically. So if you see an asset from ASCAP or BMI, it's only going to have the public performance royalties on it because that's all that they collect, right? So we may have a listing that goes up that has the songwriter side with the public performance and all that, and then another listing that goes up with the publisher side. So you could buy all of the different pieces, but they are going to be fragmented in that kind of way. I think that should answer your question. Robert, I don't know if you guys want to add to that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, just a listing in and of itself, by definition, is a fragment. Sometimes even whoever the seller is only selling a percentage of what their total entitlement is. But whatever you see as a listing on Royalty Exchange is what's for sale. We wouldn't offer like a fragment of whatever is for sale as well.
Next one here, questions about royalties and how they work. What types of royalties are available for investment on the platform? For example, music, etc. So yeah, so music obviously is the most common one. It's the most established royalty structure. So that's why we see a lot of it. But I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, have seen Listerine royalties that we host. Maybe the Cherry Garcia stuff. So we do trademarks. We do book publishing. We've done a handful of YouTube stuff, which is not exactly royalties. It's a little bit different. We got the jewelry ones that are up right now, so it's royalties from jewelry sales. So yeah, we'll do other kinds of intellectual property. Where we kind of draw the line is with like energy and mineral stuff. That's kind of a different beast, so we don't really work with that. I've had some people reach out about like medical patents, which we've to date said no about. But most forms of intellectual property will include assuming that it's saleable. I had another guy reach out about his actor residuals, which can't really work with SAG-AFTRA, so we couldn't really do that. But we'll look at it. We'll look at anything really, and then what we can do kind of depends on the structures at play. So. Next question here. Are the royalty payouts automated for direct deposit? Yes. Do we log in and submit a payout per interval? No, we'll just take care of it. Once you're set up in our payment processor portal, whatever account you have there, as soon as we get the royalty payments and process them for accuracy, send them right out. Our admin terms hold a 30-day window from receipt of the royalty payments to turn it around, get it out. That's just to account for any hiccups that we might run into, like say we get the statements but not the payment, or say the payment is inaccurate to the statements that we got. So it gives us time to figure that out. Right now, our average processing time, I think it's about like 9 days, Rob, for the last meeting we had. I think it's around 9 days right now. It's actually getting shorter, which is really, really nice. So that's kind of the expected time frame. But yeah, it could take as long as 30 days, depending on what's going on. And then, high volume time periods like end of September, which is when all the quarterly, monthly, biannual, and annual payments hit at the same time. Since we address this stuff on a first in, first out kind of method, September may sometimes be a little bit slower. But yeah, it's all improving, so it's getting faster. Next question here. What are the taxes associated with this type of investment in France? What is the risk of loss? How long do the sounds last? So the international taxes will just follow whatever the tax treaty is between the US and wherever you are. So the tax treaty between the US and France. For international buyers, you do have to sign a W-8-BENE with us instead of a W-9, just to account for that foreign tax withholding. But beyond that, talk to your tax advisor. That's really all we can answer there. Risk of loss, I mean, that's kind of up to you and the price you pay. Obviously, if you pay a 50x multiple on an asset, you may struggle a little bit. Um, so that's kind of up to you. I would also refer you to the ultimate guide and look at the different risks that we outline in that, kind of like we discussed earlier in this call, just to kind of quantify what you're looking at. Same with the length of the copyright. We've talked about that a couple times. We covered all this stuff already. Is Royalty Exchange open to investors? Do you mean Royalty Exchange like us, the company? Not currently, but shoot me a note if you're interested, and I'll keep you in mind should anything change, but not currently. Next one here. Life of rights means beneficiaries can inherit the royalties. Yes. You can pass these down. In fact, a lot of people will buy royalty assets and house them under a trust for their kids for generational holdings. So that's a pretty common strategy. Yeah, so you absolutely can do that. I purchased a 30-year copyright. Suppose the platform goes bankrupt after 15 years. How can my copyrights and income be protected? We already covered that. I'd like to know more about the payment method, earnings receiving paths, and tax for overseas investors. So our payment processor currently uses ACH pathways for how they pay out the payments, even overseas. So there's minimal to no fees for their service. So that's how it does it. Now, when it does that, it does default to your local currency. So there is a currency conversion fee that gets dinged somewhere along the way. Normally it's from the receiving bank, so your bank, and that can vary. We can pay out USD in international accounts. Since that doesn't use the ACH rails, uses wire rails, normally that comes with a fee per transfer that is unfortunately outside of our control. That's the banks charge that to do that. So that's how that's kind of structured. If you do your local currency, then it should all be free, barring the currency conversion risk. And if you choose to use USD, then obviously there might be some transfer fees. Or if you have a Wise account, we do have some solid workarounds for Wise accounts that you can still receive USD into your international accounts. So if you have questions about that, let me know and I kind of walk you through how to set that up. So there's a couple different options. I would like to know more about the payment method. Oh, we just did that. Okay. What do I have to look forward to by investing via Royalty Exchange? The assets are real, the assets are safe, everything's taken care of for you. You save a ton of legal costs. I mean, like the benefits go on and on and on and on and on. Sourcing these assets is extremely difficult, and we've got a pretty sterling reputation within the music industry. So a lot of artists come to us, so we get a lot of stuff to offer. So yeah, there's a ton of benefit. I mean, just going through all those risks earlier in the presentation, I mean, just at a glance, we eliminated half right away. Yeah, so there's a lot to look forward to. Next, I'd like to walk through rate of return models and how the differing variables play into it, such as dollar rate, genre, etc. So we kind of touched on that a little bit with our methodologies. If you want to have a more specific conversation about it, or reach out to me, we could schedule a call. That's kind of a long conversation, and we don't have enough time for that in this call here. But happy to have a one-on-one call, talk through this stuff, ways we see different aspects of a catalog impacting it. So yeah, let us know. I'm most interested in hearing about the long-term plans for the company. Improvements everywhere, more, better, higher quality assets, better quality of life features for investors, more robust assets. I mean, that's kind of the long-term plan. mean, like, we want to talk about, 10 years, it would be great if all royalty transactions happen on royalty exchange instead of, like some backroom negotiation, create an open market for this stuff. Then for you guys as royalty holders, you would have crazy, crazy upside for your holdings. The bigger we get, the better stuff transacts. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, Rob, if you have anything that you want to throw in there, I mean,
Nope.
yeah, that's pretty much it. Where should new investors begin their homework for developing evaluation skills in the space? Look at the Ultimate Guide. That's going to be your best friend. Use that and look at the assets on Royalty Exchange and run analyses. We provide all the raw data. We're as transparent as we can be with that stuff. So, yeah, just take a look at it. Royalty investment is new to me. How does the age of the royalty impact its value? So the general rule of thumb with the age, we use the dollar age, which is kind of like a weighted average age of a catalog and its earnings. Typically, the older the catalog, the more consistent the royalty payments are. So roughly, if you were to think about when a new song is released and what its lifespan of consumption looks like, right? So the new song is released and it gets promoted by the label, publisher, everybody. So it gets on radio stations and they're on tour to promote the new album. Album sales are going up, everything, right? So in the early life, you see a big, big spike in the earnings. Typically, it's between years 1 to 3, kind of depending on how everything's handled. And that's really going to be your peak earnings, somewhere in that 1 to 3 year period as it's getting promoted, it's on radio, getting premium plays, etc. After that point, you're going to see a drop. It's going to go off radio circulation. New albums are going to come out that are going to get popular and take the limelight. Maybe you'll be reaching the tail end of the tours for the artist. So you'll see a decay, which can be significant, sometimes as much as an 80 or 90 drop from the peak. After that kind of tumult from the peak, which is normally like between years 4 to 6, sometimes 7, then the earnings will start to level out. And that's when, people who are fans of the music, who love the songs, whatever, they kind of indoctrinate into their regular listening. Many of you may have, a regular playlist that you go back to, or, songs from your high school days that you love that you still listen to, right? Now, people like you who listen to that music regularly, they really make up that tail. Or say, like, for example, it was an iconic song from a time period, and so now it's getting regular play in like an 80s radio station, like Duran Duran would, for example. All of those things can contribute to that tail of earnings, but that tends to be pretty consistent. So the dollar age and the age of the catalog generally helps us measure where along that life cycle the earnings might be, so you kind of help quantify the volatility of the earnings on a move forward basis. And that's kind of the rough explanation for the impact of the age. Some institutional buyers might call that the vintage of the catalog, but it's all really the same thing. It's all kind of trying to measure the same phenomenon. Dayton or Rob, I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add on to that.
Yeah, we always like to talk about dollar age. It's a metric that we really like. To
Yeah.
get more information on it, you can just Google dollar age, and I think we're probably the number one hit on Google. So it'll kind of get into the weeds a little more on
Yeah.
that as well if you're interested.
Yeah, and then we have a blog page too that kind of gets into the calculation for it, a lot more of the factors that go into it. So there's a lot to take in for it. If you are having trouble finding that, let me know. I can send it to you. It also should be in the Ultimate Guide. Again, best resource that exists. So definitely take a look. Any plans to integrate blockchain tech to distribute music royalties? Not for us. Not for us, but depending on how that technology embeds itself in the music industry largely, that could change. I don't think that I have not seen or heard of any plans or intentions to do that from anywhere, but who knows, What measures do you do to prevent friendly bids to drive auctions higher? Yeah, we've got a full-on clearance system for any investor who wants to participate. And then, the seller also has oversight on them to make sure that nothing like that's happening. I don't think we've ever seen it happen. Right, Rob? I don't I don't can't think
Yeah, I
of
mean
those instances.
it's a breach of the listing agreement for the seller to bid on their own listing or cause someone else to bid on it. But like you said, if you've been verified as an investor on Royalty Exchange, you get to go through a little bit of a process, and ultimately every action you take on the marketplace is binding, and we'd be able to easily see whether a bid that you made was you did not have an intent on actually purchasing the asset.
Yeah. Yeah. So bunch of measures in place that happen before an asset even goes up and more. So, how often do royalties come available? What's been the average return for the last 1 year? Royalty assets go up every week. Um, the frequency and number that go up kind of depends on which artist's ready to move forward at what given point. But we have full-time staff here who's constantly working with different artists, reaching out to new artists, bringing in new assets. And then, a lot of artists approach us saying, "Hey, I want to sell." So there's always a constant influx of new assets, just kind of, how long does it take us to get through the due diligence? How quickly can we get all the information we need? How easily can we get the statements? All that can kind of factor in. Average return, date and last analysis we did, it was like 12.6% average, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. It typically hovers around 13%, 12 to 13%. Last time
Yeah.
I think we looked was 12.6.
Yeah, that sounds right. And that's for life of rights specifically. The 10-year stuff can be a bit more volatile, kind of depending on what it is. Uh, but yeah, that's typically what it's been. I think for both 3 years and 1 year, it'd be about the same answer. It hasn't changed too much. Uh, have we seen the full effect of the royalty board rate adjustment play out, or are more mega payments to come? More to come. How do you compare yields of royalties with corporate bond yields in treasuries? What is the credit risk tied to royalties? Um, I mean, how do we compare it with treasury bonds?
I think that T-bills, the returns on those can inform um, the price on the royalty assets on the site because we see that
Yeah.
um, you know, when the returns on a risk-free asset, quote unquote, for treasury bonds goes up, uh, we also see that that informs the investor bid behavior because they are trying to get the same type of return that they got on their music assets that they did before uh, those yields went up on bonds. Um, so they're higher. I think that like the yields that we expect to see on music assets would tend to be higher because there is a bit more risk that's baked into it. But a big
Right.
part of our proposition for these royalties is that even though this is a passive income asset and it's an alternative asset, it's not something that you can acquire any place in the world. There's a lot of benefits to it that will reduce your risk by holding this as part of your portfolio. Music is uncorrelated to what's happening in the broader market. Uh, People listen to music regardless if stocks are up or stocks are down. If people are listening to music all over the world, it is growing in a lot of segments in streaming on the foreign side. So I think that they track pretty closely. I don't know if we've done a hard analysis to see exactly what the correlation is, but I think that it's a few points higher than a risk-free return asset.
Yeah. Typically, yeah. I would say that like on the low end, people are looking for like, 7 to 8% from royalty assets.
Yeah,
And that's for like the really quality stuff. That's going to be really
yeah,
consistent. Because again, right, if you're comparing it to the risk-free treasury, it might be between 4 to 6%, depending on what year you're looking at, right? So yeah, it does depend, but they're different assets, right? So you buy them for different things. Um, so there's
it's a
that
really good
part of it
question.
too. Yeah. Credit risk tied to royalties. Not really sure how to answer that. I don't, Dane, if you have any thoughts on what that.
I can't speak to that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry.
all the partners that we work with for these distributing assets, are by and large established music companies.
Yeah.
The majors, they're the like Warner, Universal, Sony. They're big on the label side and the publishing side. the PROs across the world, in at least like the West, in Europe, and a lot of the major Asian countries. They've been around for decades, if not over 100 years. So, and their function is uh springs from copyright and is usually a government organization, so pretty rock solid in terms of long-term viability, I would say.
Yeah.
It can vary a bit for like smaller publishers, indie publishers, smaller companies that are more newly established. We see that a lot with digital distributors, especially in countries outside the US. But usually very little counterparty risk in terms of the distributor paying the asset.
Yeah, and this actually relates to Ben. I see your question here. Assuming you're able to contact a royalty payer and confirm that they will assign and pay, are there any other reasons you would not allow a certain payer's royalties to be listed? Like if it were a small administrator without much history, which is exactly what Dayton's talking about. And yeah, if we feel that someone who's collecting and paying out royalties, we aren't comfortable with it, or we see sufficient risk to not include it, we'll absolutely say no. Um,
We've definitely done that in the past. We've
yeah,
looked at publishers that or labels that are based outside of, either new in the US or outside the US that don't have a lot of track history. When we are looking at these assets and doing due diligence, we also assess like, how are these royalties being paid? Is there a regular schedule? Is there some issue with the frequency of payments where, stuff is not coming out when it's expected? A lot of companies require that their clients invoice them for their royalties. So, c- labels that do that, especially, we're much less likely to work with them because there's a lot more work to do. And there is more of that unknown quantity in terms of, what's really going to be happening with this asset 5, 10 years down the line.
yeah.
And we don't want to, have a bad, experience for our, people selling or people buying on the site.
Yeah. I mean, there are even some companies that still pay exclusively by mailing a paper check and they don't do direct deposits. Um, so like there's still a lot of antiquated systems out there that, will all impact what we feel is reasonable, especially for you guys as investors, like we want to make sure that you guys are having a good experience, you're getting paid on time, you're like, yeah, so things like that all come into the equation. We've also in some cases we've required that, like say it was a publishing asset, we require that they move to a different publisher, one that we do know and trust and can work with, as a requirement and a contingent. The sale being contingent upon that happening. So that's happened too. Again, like in us doing our best efforts to bring more stuff for you guys to consider, we'll even go so far as to do stuff like that. So, yeah, to answer your question, yes, we do turn stuff away, and we will do everything we can to make it a viable asset for you. A couple more, 5 more questions here. Hi, I pay withholding tax of 30% only on American earned royalties. Is there any solution to avoid this as I am not a US resident? Can't really answer that. That's a tax question. So talk to your tax advisor, fortunately. Um, how has the market been performing the last 10 years, year on year? Excellent, honestly. Growth every year. Every year is our best year yet. So yeah, the market's been growing like crazy. Um, more, bigger, higher quality assets. Yeah, just more stuff. The stigma on selling your royalties has largely been lifted in the last 5 years. So I would say expect to see more and more high quality stuff. I think the Duran Duran listing going live today is just one example. Um, so yeah, up and to the right. Where do you see Spotify streaming revenues paid to songwriters and artists trending in the future? Boy, that's a good question. Um, I expect they will continue to go up. Um, but there is some question on how or in what form. So we talked about the CRB rates, and Spotify is trying to change the labeling on their bundling to get around paying higher rates. But since these rates are re-examined every 5 years, I don't see them having much success because the board's to come in and look at what's happening and be like, hey, you can't do that. But it's an ongoing discussion. So we'll see. Spotify's gonna keep growing. They keep increasing their member dues. They're trying to push for more premium memberships, and all that translates to more royalty payments and bigger royalty payments because it's based on their revenue. So I think that they'll keep going up, but that's just
Yeah.
kind of my opinion.
I, I think that there's like a couple of like sort of different fundamental forces at work, like embedded in that question, that John touched on, that are sort of like um in competition and in conversation with each other. So
Yeah.
Spotify is a company that, wants to generate a profit. It uses music and other content to make that money for the subscription and ad free and the ad tier revenues. But it has to pay a lot of that money out to the rights holders to make use of their IP on their platform. That license turns into the royalty that then gets paid to the artist, songwriter, or publisher, which would then be paid to the investor post sale. So Spotify is going to try to mitigate their costs. And that can be the bundling piece that John had touched on, where there was, you can look into like the CRB, NMPA, Spotify bundling to like see some like pretty irate quotes from folks in the publishing industry about Spotify making some changes to their the pricing schemes and bundling after some of these negotiations on rates, which is sort of funny. But you get why Spotify is doing it, right? They're also going to, play around with their subscription pricing schemes, absent trying to address like these license fees they pay. They want to try to, finesse their tiers to figure out how to bring more people onto the platform, make more money. So that would obviously translate into more revenue that increases the percentage that gets paid out as a royalty. There's also talk about these like artist or fan centric streaming models that would sort of fundamentally change how royalties get paid out on various DSPs, in terms of how that money gets allocated between the different players. That could also potentially inform to a degree how that factors into these royalties. Um, we touched on also like sort of the larger forces that work in the music industry. We still see growth on streaming platforms. The foreign side, they expect to see a lot of really robust growth from emerging markets, and that's going to translate into higher royalties, more plays
Yeah.
from Spotify and other DSPs.
And we're
So
talking high double digits too. Like,
yeah. So the forecast, I mean, I think for streaming, for Spotify and for streaming generally is, I think, pretty bright in terms of year over year growth, probably double digit year over year growth for the short term future. But after that, like it's tough to say. And again, these licenses come up for renewal, renegotiation all the time. Um, Interesting to see how all these things will play out.
yeah. And then let's not forget new technologies too, right?
Yeah.
TikTok was a big one. It's new technologies, new licenses, created new royalty revenue streams. What's the next TikTok, right? Like you get into conversations about Web3 and virtual reality and all that stuff. So there's a lot more beyond our imaginations too. Of, the saying goes, life needs a soundtrack. So we have very bullish expectations. Okay, a couple more here. How do you reduce valuations for fixed term investments versus life of copyright? I think the biggest one for that is to kind of figure out what your time to break even is, because you do have a limited time period. Because that's gonna your earnings beyond that is going to be your upside basically. So that's I think the biggest thing to consider. Um, Dane, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the it's sort of QED, right? Like the biggest factor that is the difference between life of right copyright and fixed term is the term itself. The fixed term that we have on our site is usually 6 years. So that's 6 years of cash flows that you would expect to get paid out. So if you're an investor, you may want to forecast how much money you think this asset is going to be generating over that period of time. Versus life of copyright, you can forecast as far as you want, but I think a pretty typical strategy is to forecast out for 10 years and then bake into your forecast some kind of terminal value. Put that into your 10 and then figure out from there what the value of that asset looks like. So you're talking about how much money you get over 6 years, and then that spout gets turned off, versus how much money this could potentially make over an indefinite time horizon. Um,
Yeah.
that's how you reduce those. That's like I think the most powerful factor. And then because you're talking about a fixed term, you're going to want to bake in a bit more risk into your pricing analysis because that's time limited.
Yep.
So if you were getting, an indefinite money for an indefinite period of time, you can probably be a bit less risk averse in terms of your returns over a certain time horizon.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we got two more here, and then we'll get to you guys submitted questions. We've got a lot. First, does rights ownership allow for direct contact with the label or publisher to talk about activities to improve future performance? No, it specifically does not. You are buying a passive interest in the royalties. So it does not come with any kind of advocacy or anything towards the promotion or marketing of the IP. You do not have that right. It's not included. These are passive assets.
Yeah, John, and this gets into a couple of the submitted questions, so I think I might be able to try to
Okay,
wrap
cool.
this into one answer. So yeah, like John said, so the right that you're buying is the right to the royalty stream itself. A lot of times, even the distributors or publishers, will say that you're not a third party beneficiary of the original agreement. You're buying the rights to the royalty, so you don't have licensing authority. You're really just kind of investing alongside whoever the publisher is. They're the ones that are in charge of and have the rights to do the licensing. We have one question here that says, do the rights contracts state the terms with the publishers and labels, and then when the deals are up, in the ability to renegotiate such contracts? So the the contract do state the terms. If, for example, there's like a 15-year retention period on the publisher's ability to administer the royalties, but the seller wants to sell the royalties for life of rights, what we do is then have them extend that retention period for administration on their share for the life of rights, or to match whatever term that they're selling the royalty stream for, so that the current administrator will stay in place, so that the seller does not need to be involved in any sort of renegotiation. We're setting the royalty stream in its place, and then those royalties will flow for the remainder of the rights. And I think Charles asked a question about what role do reversion rights play in royalty sales. That's if we're talking about a contractual reversion of administration, that would get into that. There's also a concept in the U.S. copyright law called copyright termination. And Charlie, let me know if that's what you're asking about instead, and we can get into that a little bit. I think there was one more question talking about what ongoing support does Royalty Exchange offer to investors post-purchase to help maximize the value of their assets. So again, we don't have any licensing authority. What we do is we can be a liaison between the investor and the distributor. We're collecting the royalty payments. We have an insight onto to the payments that are coming in. If there's any sort of missed payment issues, then we can contact and work with the labels and distributors and publishers directly to ensure that the payments are flowing, to see if there's any issues that we can help sort out. So I think that covers the few that would kind of be in that.
Cool. Yeah.
In that
We'll get through the rest of these submitted ones too. Last one
Oh,
for
sorry,
Oh.
John. Well, Charlie was actually about copyright termination. So there's a provision in the U.S. copyright law that says that if you, the creator of a copyright, have assigned your copyright to someone else, you have the right to terminate that copyright assignment after 35 years. And there's kind of a sliding scale on how that goes. And the way the royalty exchange works is, since our sales are assignment of income rights, there's not an assignment of a copyright, so there'd be nothing for the seller to terminate as to the investor. There was actually a case earlier this year with Sonny Bono's royalties that had been assigned to Cher. Sonny Bono's widow attempted to do a termination uh, of that assignment based on the copyright termination, and the court said you can't do that. It was a assignment of royalties. It was not an assignment of copyright. So that was a good news, obviously, for our investors, where what we're selling are the rights to the royalty stream, not the underlying copyright. And again, when we do these deals and the seller wants to assign the rights for life of copyright, they then extend the administration rights with their existing publisher to cover the full life of copyright.
Cool. Yeah, you got it, Charlie. Last one that was submitted here is, what are the two most important aspects to consider when deciding to purchase a royalty? That's really up to you. Some people will consider the term length. Some people will consider the age of the catalog. Some people will consider, oh, it's all streaming. I mean, some people will consider, oh, it's earning from a lot of different tracks. It's kind of up to you, your strategy, and what kind of portfolio you're trying to build. I think if you ask 10 different people, they would give you 10 different answers. So yeah, I can't really answer that one. Okay, now let's just run from the top here. How can I ensure that the tracks I am buying are all registered with the respective local PROs, et cetera, globally? It's kind of a due diligence question, I guess, Rob, right?
Well, I guess if we're only talking about the U.S. PROs in this case, the PROs, it's kind of their responsibility to ensure that they're collecting from all of the foreign PROs, and the foreign PROs are responsible for reporting all of the earnings that happen within their home territory, paying those through to the local territory. What you could do if you're looking at a listing, an ASCAP or BMI listing, you can look at the earnings, and it'll show you all the different countries that those royalties are coming from. It's really up to whoever the seller's PRO is to ensure that those monies are coming in. So there's not a whole lot that an investor would do. It's really kind of supposed to happen within the PRO ecosystem.
Wouldn't that also be the responsibility of the publisher as well, managing the catalog for their client?
Right.
Yeah, and looking foreign territories, they almost always or often work with sub-publishers within those territories as well.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a similar setup where the sub-publishers are collecting within their own territory and then paying those through to the local publisher.
Right. And that's kind of one of the benefits too of assets on royalty exchange, is there's still plenty of individuals, corporate entities with a vested interest in the success of the IP that you are also earning from. So there is kind of support out there for the property, just you don't have the direct control of it. Next one, was the spike a year or two ago in the Hungry Like a Wolf royalty a result of catch-up payments, something else? Do we know? Are you talking about this first quarter 24 bump here? I have not looked at the raw data myself. Dayton, I don't know if you have. Since this is just public performance royalties, it's probably, I don't know, probably some kind of sync or streaming something.
There were a lot of live earnings on this one as well. So
were there? Okay.
I haven't seen the granular data, but I imagine that it could be from some pretty big live performance earnings.
Okay, could be.
And that
once this-
ties in. We had a question at the end asking, someone joined late and asked what the Duran Duran listing is, and what it is this is a sneak preview. This is probably in about 45 minutes. It'll be popping up on the marketplace. So we wanted to give the folks that joined here a little sneak preview of what's about to come up.
Yeah, and many of you, I'm sure, know we don't really do sneak preview stuff. sometimes we'll be like, hey, something's going live, and then it never goes live. I still get crap from some people about the Ed Sheeran catalog that almost was. So yeah, we don't really do that anymore. But this one is going up today.
Yeah,
Um,
once it goes up, you're gonna have a chance to look at the data that is on the listing, and you should be able to tell for that 1Q24 payment, that nice little trend up, what's
yeah,
driving that, where that money comes from.
it should be in the summaries, but the raw data will for sure have it. So
Yeah.
will we also establish options for derivatives investments on musical royalties in the future? Look, I would love it if we could do stuff like that. Uh, not yet. Not yet. As we grow and get bigger, the music industry gets more sophisticated, the data gets more sophisticated, like maybe we could start to trend in that direction, but no plans for it right now. And yeah, we'll see. Give us 10 years. We'll see. Uh, JV, if you have time and this one is annoying, the artist is not included in the raw files. It makes DD incredibly difficult by missing something. You are not missing anything. We are actively building some back-end functionalities that will hopefully enable us to include artists on track lists at some point. We're working on it. You know better than most how the data isn't always the cleanest and isn't always the easiest, but we are actively building some stuff that should make it way better. So best I can say is stay tuned for now. Our tech team, these guys are really doing some incredible stuff for us. So um, yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah, for other folks, in general, we try to put the top 5 or 10 songs, of that are earning. We'll in the breakdown of each listing, we'll try to talk about the artists of each of those tracks. The information is knowable because Songview that the ASCAP and BLI work on oftentimes have artists included on their repertoires. The MLC is getting a lot better about tying compositions to sound recordings and showing artists on that. So we can kind of utilize those kind of databases, and that's what John was saying. Like we're working on it. If you have questions on certain songs, those are some public databases that are good to use to check to see which artists are associated with it with which composition.
Yeah, this is not an official database either, but Rap Genius. If you ever have like a songwriter or an artist to go on there, you can find pages and credits for most of the big tracks. That is also probably a pretty good way to match what you see in your listing and your asset against some other sources to do some digging.
Cool. Next one here are MLC catch-up payments to royalty exchange clients made separately from regular payments. Great question. No, they are not. They are lumped into the overall royalty distribution from the publisher. We just because we have been looking out for them, we see these big outlier payments, kind of like we showed here. And what we can do is we can go in and look at either the licensor, which is sometimes the MLC, or we can, see the reporting period for the distribution period and retroactively apply that to see what those periods are from. So there are ways that we can manipulate the data to look at it and see it. But yeah, normally you can tell, like for example here. But the data, you can always work with the data and get a clearer picture too. Are there any restrictions for me to resell my rights at a later point via a different royalty exchange? No, technically you could sell your assets you bought on royalty exchange somewhere else. Some people have done stuff like that. You probably won't get as good a price just because we are the biggest, most robust active market. So I don't think that you would want to do that, but you are free to do that if you wanted to. It's your asset. Like we mentioned before, your purchase agreement, it's a direct purchase. You'd really just have to tell us like, hey, send the royalties here versus to here. Because we would still run the administration on it. But yeah, you can if you wanted to. Question here. I have an interest in the KZ Elephant, Dire Straits, and Eminem catalogs. Have the catalogs received their catch-up payments yet? I don't know. I don't know.
Well, just one point of clarification is The Cage the Elephant asset was a publishing asset, so that will be entitled to the digital mechanical catch-ups. The Dire Straits and Eminem catalogs, those are both sound recording deals. So those would not have the digital mechanicals because that's a right specific to the composition side.
Cool. There you go. For copyrights owners that look to sell their copyrights, are there any protections as it relates to restrict use of music for purposes the owner does not agree with? Think political ads. No.
Yeah, so that kind of goes to the same question we talked about earlier, how it's a passive right, and
Yeah.
the investor actually does not have the right to any sort of licensing approvals or rejections.
Yeah, good question though. What percentage of listings are purchased within premium and never make it to regular listing? I'm not sure I understand your question. Because everything gets posted to get purchased. That's one of the pillars of royalty exchanges. It's an open market. So everything gets a listing if it sells on royalty exchange. So yeah, if you have some clarification for that one, Kevin, let me know. Or maybe if you want to hop on a call and talk about what you're talking about, might be easier too. JB, while we're on that, do sellers have visibility into active views and recent view counts, trending view counts, etc.? Not really. Some publishers say like, oh, we give real-time data on your royalty earnings. So I don't trust those to be very accurate. But not really. I mean, maybe they'll have view on their own social media accounts. Are you talking about?
JB, you may have been talking about views on their own listings from investors. If that's the case, let us know, and well, we can
Yeah,
answer it if it is.
from the seller side.
Right. So,
Um,
can they see how many people are viewing their listing? I think they only actually see offers,
yeah, they only see
right?
offers.
Yeah, I don't think they have views on the listing itself.
Sure thing. Next one. Sometimes I notice unknown payments listed under certain assets. What does that mean, and what should investors be aware of? Normally that relates to the data not giving detail, right? Like that's normally what I see there.
Yeah, so what that means, it could be a variety of things. Oftentimes, I think you will see unknown payments or ambiguous payments show up on your statements when you're looking at a foreign royalty and there is a data integrity issue.
Yeah.
A lot of the foreign PROs might report in different formats, different languages, as that data gets passed between various societies, various territories. Some of it could get lost in translation. Or they may be giving really high level information about what the usage represents, such that it can still be ambiguous. One thing I think I see, like for an example, like on statements for German royalties, there's like a line from GEMA called like Normalzuschlag. I think you see that like on every game payment of like a few dollars. Um, and I think that that's just something you have to translate to figure out what exactly that means. Uh, that will arise from time to time. Generally, you're not going to see a lot of money accrue to unknown or unreported payment lines on a statement. If you do, let us know. I think that we can look into some stuff and see if there's anything we could potentially track back. But oftentimes it's because the data at source is just not up to snuff.
Yeah. Like if you were looking at a listing and if for those of you that are familiar, our bar charts normally use a two-color schema, green and blue, purple, whatever. Occasionally it'll have gray to denote unreported or unknown. And yeah, since that's all summarizing the data, it's because it's from the source. Um, so yeah, if you see that, depending on where it's getting paid from, like Dayton said, the international, it's pretty not uncommon, I should say.
Yeah.
But yeah. Any other questions? A lot of good questions today. But we'll give you guys a few minutes for any last call questions, and if there's nothing else, we'll wrap it up here. And we'll get this Duran Duran listing up for you guys to take a look at. But give you a minute
Yeah.
to think it over. Anything else? Yeah. Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna thank everyone for hanging in with us for the office hour and a half. So
Yeah.
it's been a good one. We always appreciate your thoughtful questions and makes it certainly better for us as well.
JB,
JB
as the
yeah.
listing is live for sale, are you updating the earnings if royalties are paid? Yes. So if ever, for example, you see an expiry on a listing, it's like this listing will be good through, November 15th or whatever.
Like
That's
the Duran
denoting.
Duran one we're showing right here is January 20th.
Right, exactly. Perfect example. That's the next expected distribution, in which case, when those earnings come out, we'll take this down. If there's any outstanding offers, we'll cancel them. And then we'll update the earnings and put it back up. And that will happen for everything. So that way you always know that when you're looking at an asset, it's the most up-to-date data available. Um, yeah, that's built in. Yeah, for sure, JB. Always happy to help and love seeing a lot of familiar names here. So thank you guys all for coming. Hope this was informative. Check out Duran Duran going up soon. Super excited about that one. Um, as always, if you have any other questions or anything you need, feel free to reach out to us. I've had direct conversations with I think almost everyone on this call already, so you know how to reach me. If not, investors at royaltyexchange.com reaches me. Chat program will reach someone. Call in. You can always reach us. Um, just to close out, I'm John Gessel, Client Relations Coordinator, Investor Relations Coordinator, a little bit of everything. Rob Bernhard, Corporate Counsel, Dayton O'Connor, Lead Analyst. Um, thank you guys all again. Have a good rest of your weeks and best of luck out there.
Thanks, y'all.
See ya.